Will China invade Taiwan? Does China still control Taiwan? When did China take over Taiwan? Why does China not want independence from Taiwan? Why is Taiwan so important? The US is supposed to be watching for signs of a Chinese invasion very intently. Hey folks, welcome back to Studying Scholar. In this video, we are going to find out if China is invading Taiwan soon, and let us dive in. Taiwan's ties with its superpower neighbor China have fluctuated between icy silence and open threats of invasion since the island's rapid economic and political transition in the 1980s and 90s. The island has been described as the most hazardous place on Earth by The Economist due to its proximity to Beijing, which considers it a breakaway province and has seen a pattern of what Taipei sees as stepped-up military harassment of Beijing for months, according to Reuters. The prolonged disagreement has drawn in world powers, with U.S. Vice President Joe Biden reaffirming the U.S. commitment to supporting its Asia-Pacific partner and Secretary of State Antony Blinken urging for the island's meaningful participation at the UN. The Economist noted that if China's military supremacy rises, the likelihood of Beijing employing force against Taiwan becomes more likely. What's the latest about the conflict? A Chinese attack on Taiwan is not imminent, but the U.S. is monitoring for signs of one, a top general said. General Mark Milley, the head of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, told the BBC that China was going to build a capability to attack Taiwan, but that whether China did so was a political choice. According to The Independent, Taiwan is increasingly concerned that China may invade, leading some inhabitants to take guns training. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss urged China at the G7 summit in Madrid against invading Taiwan. That's exactly what happened in Ukraine. Putin made a big mistake, she said. According to Bloomberg, the fight over Taiwan's sovereignty is the main issue that risks developing to war between the U.S. and China, with American legislators clamoring for a pledge to intervene if Beijing invades the island. China has steadily upped its military pressure on Taiwan, sending jets close to the island and telling the U.S. that the strait separating it from Fujian province is not international waters. According to the news site, Taiwan's growing sense of nationhood and the Chinese Communist Party's sweeping crackdown on dissent in Hong Kong have led to a dramatic shift in the consensus opposing merger with China in recent years. Steve Tsang, chairman of the China Institute at SOAS University of London, said China's treatment of Hong Kong demonstrates that any claims of autonomy will be rejected. It's getting harder for Taiwanese proponents of greater mainland connection to make their case. Since 1997, when Britain handed Hong Kong to China, support for legal autonomy has more than doubled to more than 30%, while support for unity has more than plummeted to single digits. General Wei Fanghe, China's defense secretary, threatened last month that the country's troops will resolutely annihilate Taiwanese independence. In a combative speech at the Shangri-La Dialogue Security Conference in Singapore last month, he accused the U.S. of being a bully and hijacking countries in the region. Taiwan is first and foremost China's Taiwan, Wei said last month since meeting with U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin for the very first time. He warned that Beijing would fight at all costs to keep Taiwan united. How close is the war? Can drums of war be heard? During the 1940 Civil War, China and Taiwan were divided. However, Beijing has always insisted that the island should be recaptured at some point. Beijing regards Taiwan as a Chinese province and has labeled the Taipei government as separatists, while rejecting to rule out the use of force to pull it back into China's immediate orbit. Taiwan maintained the Chinese membership at the UN until October 1971, when it was voted out as the country's representative in favor of Beijing. Since then, Taipei has sought expanded engagement at the UN and its various bodies, Al Jazeera reported. Because China has pressured its friends to refuse to recognize its validity as an independent entity, it has full diplomatic ties with only 14 of the 193 United Nations members nations, as well as the Holy See. In addition, the island has its own constitution, democratically elected officials, and approximately 300,000 active forces. Beginning on October 1, Beijing sent 150 military jets into Taiwan's air defense zone, and Chinese President Xi Jinping later declared that he would accomplish the historical task of reuniting the island with the mainland. Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen has denied the claim. She stated that the country would do all it takes to protect itself against any Chinese attack, as well as writing in Foreign Affairs that a battle between the two countries would have catastrophic consequences. According to the BBC, Experts have warned for months that Beijing is worried Taiwan's leadership may declare independence. Taiwan is already an autonomous nation, Tsai's administration says. If the two countries go to war, the globe would face the core dilemma of our day, says the Times Asia editor Richard Lloyd Perry, working out what not bending to China means in practice. How the situation here can be referred to as an underdog situation? According to The Economist, if a battle erupted, it would be a catastrophe. This is due, first and foremost, to the bloodbath in Taiwan, but also to the potential of escalation between two nuclear powers, notably the US and China. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, China spends around 25 times more on its military than Taiwan. However, Taiwan and the US have a defense treaty going all the way back to 1954 Sino-American Mutual Defense Treaty, which means the US might be brought into the battle. According to Bloomberg, Beijing's hopeful version of events following the invasion decision would see cyber and electronic warfare units target Taiwan's banking system and crucial infrastructure, as well as US satellites to limit notice of oncoming ballistic missiles. Chinese vessels might also harass ships around Taiwan, limiting essential supplies of gasoline and food, the news source adding that airstrikes would immediately attempt to assassinate Taiwan's senior political and military officials, while also immobilizing local defenses. Following this, warships and submarines would traverse about 130 kilometers across the Taiwan Strait, before thousands of paratroopers would materialize above Taiwan's beaches, attempting to infiltrate defenses and take critical structures. According to Forbes, Taiwan would rely on natural defenses such as its mountainous coastline and stormy sea, with plans to throw 1,000 tanks at the beachhead in the case of a Chinese invasion, which might result in brutal tank fights that decide the outcome. According to Bloomberg, the island's top military leadership is also planning a multi-pronged reaction to an invasion that will utilize aircraft, ships, and its air defense systems to resist Chinese military advances. Taiwan is said to be keeping a careful eye on Ukraine's defense against the Russian invasion. According to the diplomat, the island is unlikely to be able to follow Ukraine's civil defense template. Ukraine's territorial defense forces' successful deployment has been critical in repelling Moscow's attack. However, establishing something similar in Taiwan is not legally nor politically feasible, according to the Asia-Pacific Focus Journal. Is the conflict global? After the signing of AUKUS, a historic military accord between the US, UK, and Australia, Theresa May expressed concern about the agreement's implications if China invaded Taiwan. May asked Boris Johnson in the Commons what this arrangement means for the UK's response if China invades Taiwan. Johnson said the treaty is not intended to be hostile against any other state, adding, "The UK remains determined to protect international law, and that's the firm advice we'd give our friends across the world, including the government in Beijing." ABC's global affairs commentator Stan Grant says, AUKUS sends a strong message to China that the US won't surrender control in the Indo-Pacific. Australia has abandoned the illusion of playing both sides by pressuring the American alliance. Is there any other option apart from this invasion? The PLA could do something other than a full-scale invasion, of course. Robert Blackwell and Philip Zelikow wrote about these options in a report for the Council on Foreign Relations last year. They include taking Taiwan's smaller islands or putting the main island under quarantine. Taiping Island, Pratas Island, Kinmen and Matsu Islands, tiny territories just a few miles off the coast of mainland China, and Penghu in the Taiwan Strait, could be all PLA targets. Even though the PLA is almost certain to win any of the four, it could bring more support for Taiwan from the rest of the world. This is similar to how Russia's invasion of Ukraine brought the West together against it. Blackwell and Zelikow both thought that the quarantine option might work better. If there was a quarantine, the Chinese government would control Taiwan's air and sea borders. The Chinese government would basically run a clearance operation at sea or in the air to check ships and planes as they came in. They say that anything seen as hostile, like US military aid for Taiwan, could be stopped or taken away because it goes against Chinese sovereignty. China could let the Taiwan government work normally except when it comes to foreign affairs. China would like this choice because it would be up to the US to decide whether or not to use force to end the quarantine. The US would then have to decide whether or not to risk a war that could kill a lot of people. If the battle erupted and the bloodbath takes place in Taiwan, what could be the consequences that other countries could also pay? Where will this catastrophe lead us all to? Tell us in the comments below what you think about it. And that brings us to the end of the video. Feel free to let us know what you think about this video, and if you like this video, then please leave a like and subscribe to our channel for all things. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.